Nice to meet you, buddy.
Yeah, you too. How was your weekend?
Yeah, nice so far. It's quite nice down here in Devon.
Get out much at all?
Not a lot now, not really, not yet. But I haven't been fishing this weekend, put it that way.
Oh God, what are you doing then? Jesus, I can. I honestly, it rarely goes a weekend by where I don't get out. It happens every now and then, but like it very rarely goes. I very rarely miss a weekend of fishing. It's quite
Yeah,
a bit of an addiction at this point.
I know when you're your age, you're free to do what you want at the weekend, I suppose, aren't you?
Yeah, and then you get tied down to little ones, and then that's it.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, no, I'm sort of weekdays and leave the weekends free, except for exceptional circumstances when I can wing it, But
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I'm like tied down to full-time work. So when I'm like, I work in an office all week, and even worse, it's in this conservatory here. And through the heat wave, it hit 40 degrees the other day. So I've been getting cooked alive. So whenever I get the opportunity, I'm like straight down there. I've been doing a lot of different stuff actually. So doing, bit of wrasse fishing down at Portland.
Oh yeah. I've not been myself. We were thinking of going this week, but
amazing
things that happen. So it is. Yeah, I heard a lot about it.
Yeah, it's. Do you know what the funny thing is? I was looking on Google Maps about it, and when you're just like looking for a new spot, and you're just like you're just going around the coast, and you're just like checking out these different spots.
Yeah.
And I found this, and I was just like, this is really good. And I wasn't thinking wrasse. I was thinking bass fishing. I was thinking I was just at the beach. It would be really good for bass fishing as well. Went down there, and it was just wrasse after wrasse after wrasse, and it was absolutely insane. Bear in mind, I'd never really targeted wrasse before, and then by the end of that day, we'd had like 20 each. It was
wow, that's good fishing,
and some really good size. Some so you'd catch the like little ones up in the like margins underneath the rock.
Yeah.
But then we switched out to the beach casters for the afternoon, and oh my God, there were some absolute stompers coming out. Like
yeah. I'm in. I help admin a group lure fishing for Wrasse UK. I don't know whether you're in it or not. And there's guys that fish up at Portland a lot. It's a big venue for the wrasse fishermen, and some of them struggle. Some of them catch a lot, and some of them struggle. I've not fished it myself, but from what I've heard, it's a bit of a mecca for that area for the wrasse fishing.
And I think it's why I wanted to get you in today, because there's wrasse fishing and then there's wrasse fishing on lures. It's two completely different worlds.
Totally,
One thing that's got a problem with where I go is it's very pressured. So on one kind of what would you call it? Almost like on one like shelf, a rock shelf, there would be about 2 to 3 anglers. It almost felt like you were on Turtle Beach. Everyone is next to each other and competing for the water. But where it was different was I would see that I'd say about 80% of the guys down there were lure fishing with black minnows and your kind of standard small bait fish kind of like imitation lures. And I've never seen someone put them out on a lure before. I know it's possible, but I feel like there's something that a lot of anglers are missing. Maybe not just from that mark, but do you know what? There's a big gap between having them off worms and then
I mean, if I'm perfectly honest, you'll catch more wrasse with bait more often.
Definitely.
But you sure catch a lot on lures as well. If you're fishing somewhere pressured, like you're talking about there, Portland Bill, I think it's like any form of fishing. You want to do something different to what everyone else is doing, because they're seeing these black minnows, which are one of the best wrasse lures going for catching wrasse. They just get chomped very easy, so they don't last very long, and they're quite expensive. So if everyone's fishing, say, little fish, I call them shads, then you want to be fishing a stick bait, like a Senko, and instead of swimming these things around, you want to be shaking them in place or something like that. If everyone's using, I don't know, one particular color, try something different. If you've seen any of my videos last year, I had, for a few years now, I've been using the old pink lure when there's a little bit of color in the water. And I thought, I should try them a bit more just in normal circumstances. People wouldn't dream of wrasse fishing with pink lures. And I was pulling loads of them out on pink lures. And it didn't matter where I was. It was just I was doing something different. And I think whether you're sort of a carp angler, you're a pike fisherman, or whatever it is, it's like that new bait thing you get with carp fishing or pike fishing, the new lure. They haven't seen it before. So if you stick it in front of their faces and it resembles something they want to eat, or with Wrasse, there's a bit of an argument at the minute whether it's we're annoying them or they're feeding. I think there's a bit of both myself. I think, you can't tell me if you put a prawn sort of imitation in front of a Wrasse, it's going to think it's a prawn. It's not going to be annoyed at a prawn. It wants to eat it. Some of these stick baits look like lugworms or other worms, I suppose. Some of the shads, maybe they're swimming through. I believe they eat these things. But I think you can annoy them. And sometimes putting something really bright on and bouncing it around in front of their noses, and just the last video I did, it wasn't a bright bait, but I got a bite. And I just had to work it. And it was as though I was sort of annoying the fish into taking the bait before it would do it. Yeah. And sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. I believe they're doing both. I think that's what's going on. Sometimes maybe a bit more one than the other. I don't know exactly when they spawn, but if they're spawning, they're sort of holed up at the time. And if you're going to put it in front of them when they're spawning, they're thinking of doing something else, aren't they? And I think they are annoyed at it then, so they're just having a bloom and go. So the bolder the thing that's in their face, they'll have it. But yeah, you just got to try to do something different to other people. So whether that will be, don't fish that ledge that everyone else is fishing, go and find a quiet ledge that isn't quite so rated. There might not be so many fish, but you might have a better chance of catching a few. And sometimes you can find the biggest fish in those sort of places, because wrasse are like any fish. They don't like pressure. If you continually fish for them in their face, they'll move. They'll go somewhere else. They love their little homes, but there's only so much pressure a fish will take, and they'll go somewhere else, or they'll stop biting.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I think that's maybe what's happening there.
Would you say, there's a kind of set size they get to before they're able to kind of cruise about effortlessly and, kind of go on that hunt a bit more? Because you don't, there's two really weird things I found about wrasse fishing. You never see them, even though it's crystal clear water and it's right below you, and it's, you can almost see the lure. But then sometimes, like, you can go to a coast and you can go for a walk, and the odd chance you'll catch a bass just cruising along the coast, or over the rock pools. Do you think there's a kind of size they have to get to before they're able to have that confidence to kind of
I guess it you could have hit on something there. Smaller fish are more wary. I mean, if you look out in your garden and see all the young fledgling birds at the moment, they're skittish, they're more wary, they're likely to hide under a bush more. So it could be with ballan wrasse, the big wrasse, I expect there is something there. The others are small fish anyway, aren't they? So they seem to hang around edges, I've noticed, with the smaller fish. Big wrasse can be anywhere. They like their home, but it depends what you're fishing over. If you're fishing I haven't been Portland, but say you're fishing off a ledge into deepish water, I imagine that's what it's like there. And you may even see your baits. I don't know. I think wrasse move more than people give them credit for. And the bigger a fish, the more confident it is in not being had by a predator, I guess.
Definitely.
But I don't think they're going to sort of cover miles of open ground. I think they might go from one rocky headland on a small cove across the sand to a big rocky headland, another rocky headland the other end, maybe something like that. Or a lot of the places I fish are reef systems, so they'll move in from further out, in over the rock pools and the rocks as they flood it up gullies to feed. So I think they do that. At other times, deeper ground, I suppose they move from one lump of rock to another lump of rock or something like that. They do hunt, and as for not seeing them, you don't see them a lot, but sometimes you can actually sight fish them. But I would presume at Portland they're very, very pressured, so they're staying in their holes, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's probably one of the most precious places for wrasse, and I don't really like that style of fishing. I think I've done it all over my kind of lifetime of fishing. I've done a lot of carp fishing, I've done a lot of beach bass. I've done literally every type of fishing that's been available to me at this time, give or take a few others. But That's one thing I really don't like, and it's being fishing in a very pressured area, and when
Yeah,
you're
I'm exactly the
amongst
same.
anglers. So I think to move away from that, I think the skill of being able to find a new spot and the skill of being able to
Exactly.
find a new area is something that everyone should have. And is there any kind of
Definitely.
like tips you could give for locating a new spot? Because
Well, I mean, your
personally,
big.
I look for
Mm,
kelp and
mm,
rocky areas. But is there
mm.
anything you picked up on your experience?
Well, your biggest thing you can do, I think you already said it, is go on Google Earth
Mm,
and look for spots. You want spots. I like reef systems that have some water at the edges of them at low tide, but then the water will flood over them, and you usually have gullies that run up to the shore, and you
mm,
can fish in these gullies. Something that sort of has a rise and fall of tide over that sort of ground between sort of a few feet and up to sort of 12 feet. So if you can find somewhere with a reef system and a gully that maybe that is at the edge of the reef system or somewhere along that reef system, um, that's my favorite sort of ground. A lot of wrasse anglers shy away from deeper water. They don't like them. Some of the top guys in the industry, they prefer these sort of reefy grounds. Um, I find deep water is good, but you're catching more fish under your feet then. So say Portland, I think it's a bit of a mix up there, isn't it? From what I can see, you've got sort of
yeah.
boulders and all sorts shallower ground, and then you've got your deeper ledges, that kind of thing. Um, if you can find boulder fields are great, but there's this, we have this saying, if you're not losing gear, you're not fishing in the right spot. It
Mm,
needs to be kelpy, rocky. If you've got clearer spots within that, that makes it more fishable. You can sort of fish to the edges of these things rather than right in the middle of them.
mm,
So if I'm just looking out to sea and I've got a few sort of lumps of rock that might be exposed at low tide, but the water comes up over, there'll be channels between the lumps of rock, and I'll cast between those channels. I'll cast out past those rocks and bring it back through those areas I want to fish.
mm.
Um, my mate, who's a very experienced wrasse angler, he likes to just flip and pitch in close, which you can do. There's, wrasse, if there's water there, wrasse will be there. I caught a fish the other day, and it's only about 3 foot of water at low tide, and it was in a ledge right under my feet. I walked around the other side, and I could see where it shelved off and just went a little bit deeper under the ledge, and that's the one I was annoying to try and catch. Um, so, yeah, if you can see it on a big spring low tide, you'll see what you're fishing over more, and you'll learn where those channels are that come through. And if you can present a bait through those channels rather than over the top of a rock, because you're not going to get anything really over the top of a bare rock, it might follow up from the other side. If you're fishing through these channels, you've got more chance of landing a fish as well. Whereas if you're fishing to the back of a rock, you got to get it up and over it, and it's harder to land these fish. So you need to be thinking about, can I land a fish if I hook one as well? And
Mm.
if you can't land it from where you are, maybe you can move around to the side, maybe somewhere, and fish from a different angle to land that fish. So you want rock, you want weed, as much as it you can get, but a little bit of clearer ground in between, and ideally a reef system with water flooding over it as the tide comes in would be my best advice.
Spot
If
on.
you To start off with, the sort of Portland is a hard place to fish. It's deep water. Deeper water is harder to catch fish from, I've personally found, but once you suss it's just as easy.
Mm. One thing, you covered, the basics of what you look for, for example, weed, rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in particular, you mentioned like reefs and,
Mm-hmm.
how you'd have a gully, which basically, channeled water throughout it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just kind of explain, like, I personally, I just want to get a bit of clarity of what you mean by a reef. So that's
Yeah.
basically, are you referring to kind of like a submerged rock pool sort of feature?
No. Well, a particular marker fish, obviously, I can't say, but if you came down, I'll take you. Where it's a lot of rocky, scuddy ground with rock pools in it, and that extends out maybe 40, 50 yards. But within all that rocky, scuddy ground, there'll be gullies that run out from the high water line
Mm.
out into it, and will always contain water. And what you'll find is the wrasse that are out past this rocky ground will be feeding in the kelp and everything on the edges of the reef system. And it can be, this reef system could go out and then it could raise up a bit and go down again. But most of it will get covered by high tide, and the water will push into these gullies that go up to the high tide line. And very often you'll find they're like channels. The wrasse will come in off of all this system and swim up into these gullies and concentrate. And then that's when you can catch lots and lots of wrasse. So that would be my ideal area. If I was looking on Google Earth, you're looking obviously down from above. I'd be looking for, areas that are submerged underwater, and all you're going to see is dark images of rocks. And if they're dark, there's going to be kelp on them. So, and weed, and maybe the little fingers that are submerged that are coming out, and there's several of them. And you just want to be looking then to fish in between these areas as the tide floods. So anywhere you've got rock, and it's might be submerged at low tide or not, but on a high tide it floods over it, you will catch wrasse. But it wants to be predominantly rock. You don't want lots and lots of sand everywhere and a little bit of rock in the middle of nowhere. The coastline itself needs to be predominantly rock around where you're fishing. You might have a little beach off to the left or the right or something like that. That's good. But yeah, some sort of reef system like that is ideal, or ledges like you have at Portland Bill, or boulders that are covered up at high tide. There's such a variation on the coast, isn't there?
But that's the thing,
Yeah.
kind of touch base on it, but the coast in the UK is just so diverse. For example, Chesil, you've got pretty much, I don't know, I can't remember the exact amount of miles long, miles of just pebble beach, no features to the eye, just endless beach. But then you go, let's say 10 minutes down the road, and you're fishing on these big rocky ledges and everything. It's kind of goes without saying that it's just too different. It's like almost like a barrier. You won't catch a wrasse on the pebble beaches, but then you will on the
rocks,
ledges and everything. But I think that's why it's kind of like it's a nice change. I do enjoy going out and trying to target other species, and mackerel are great fun, bass are great fun. But I don't know, there's just something so fun about the fight on wrasse. They're just so determined to cut you off and get under their ledge again. It will catch you off guard. For example, me, I primarily do a lot of perch fishing. Because of where I'm based. I'm based near a lot of canals, and there's not many spots near me to do a lot of sea fishing. But go from catching small perch with we call them wasps. You'll feel them on the end. You'll have a little bit of fun with them. But I mean, like where you hook the wrasse, being below your feet a lot of the time, it means when you strike into them, they are right below you, and they're just going for it. And it's just the fight on them is something that everyone should expect. Everyone who likes
definitely
needs to give it a go.
I think you touched on it there with the perch fishing. I do some perch fishing as well, and you can transfer from perch fishing to wrasse fishing. You can use the same gear, as long as you use the upper sort of ranges of your perch fishing.
Not the lightest of stuff.
No, don't go your LRF. You can do that. You can catch wrasse on LRF in the sea. I'm not against that. There's chaps that do that all the time. I'm after the larger ballon wrasse. So, but a £0.5 perch, the way that's going to fight compared to a £0.5 wrasse is 100-fold, because these rafts are so stocky and sturdy and have such a big stocky tail on them. They just dive, and that catches people out. People think, well, it doesn't look too big, does it? But they can smash you up. They really do. You hook something in the £3 to £4 to £5 range on light gear, and you're in trouble. You might get away with it. I'm not saying you won't. But if you're regularly targeting fish that sort of size, even £2, then that's when you need heavier gear. I mean, I don't know whether you want me to run through the sort of basic gear that I would use for wrasse fishing. Would that help?
Yeah, because I think a big problem with wrasse fishing, I don't know if you've experienced, but if you're slow to kind of give them that initial pump to get them up, they will just bury themselves in that rock area. And if you don't have the strength to cut, well, not your strength, physical strength, your rod doesn't have the backbone in it to pump them out, you find a losing battle.
it's a balance between having a rod that's got the feel and the backbone. I mean, that's the key to it. If I personally wouldn't go below a rod that was rated up to 21 grams. So that's the higher end of your perch gear, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say 21 gram. Personally, it sounds crazy, but I'm going down to 5 gram maximum casting weight for my, perch gear. Just
yeah,
for,
yeah, yeah.
I absolutely love the sensitivity of it.
Yeah,
But
yeah, no,
with
definitely.
your rods, going up to 20 grams casting weight, are you?
Yeah.
Have they still got sensitivity? What are you? What's
Yeah,
your
they still
setup
have. I
looking
mean, that's the lower end of what I would use. What I personally use is a rod that's rated, I think it's either 10 to 35 or 12 to 35 gram. It's a Savage Gear Finesse. It's an 8'3" rod. And if you go from perch and then pick that up, you're going to go, whoa, blimey, that's a bit poker, isn't it? It's really not. The minute you hook a pound wrasse on it, you're going to think, oh, it's got a lovely tip on it. So that's not an expensive rod. You can spend a lot of money on rods, but ideally you want something that will, I would say, around 30 grams, it's top end. You can go higher than that if you're like I do. Sometimes you're fishing for really big wrasse regularly. That's why I've gone to 35. I know a guy who's going up to 45 and he's hooking fish, and I'm glad I got this, because you know yourself how hard they pull. If you're fishing in close in deeper water, that accentuates it a bit. They're going to pull even more. And I think we mentioned drag. Either don't set your drag, have it full locked, or very little. So it'll give, if you hook that biggest of all fish, it will give you a chance of landing it. So that sort of brings us on to reels. So you can use bait casters if you want, but if you were just starting, fixed spool, don't mess around. Get a fixed spool. Any of the manufacturers, a 3,000, 4,000 size fixed spool, you could get away with a slightly smaller one if you're transitioning. Say you've got 2.5 size reel for your perch fishing, give it a go. If your gear is a little bit lighter, just fish areas where it's not quite so rocky and weedy. You've got a chance of landing a fish. That's all I sort of say about that. But yeah, a 3,000, 4,000 size reel is ideal. Chuck some 20-pound braid on, whichever is your favorite. I use a cheap braid by Casking. It's called Superpower. If you can, it works. It's compared to some of my mates' braids, Sunline and things like that. It's a bit of a tow rope, but it does the job. I use it in bright yellow because you can see bites as well on the line, and you can see where your line is and where you're coming through the gullies.
Dropping down and everything.
Exactly, yeah. You might see it flick, and that's a fish. Sometimes you'll pick them up on the drop. And then you want a leader. I use fluorocarbon. It's £15. Berkeley Trilene 100%. Doesn't have to be that. Any fluorocarbon you like. Or you could use mono if you don't want to use fluorocarbon. Do the same. That leader, if you can learn the FG knot, don't learn the full FG knot with this risotto finishes it. You don't need to. You can do, there's a channel on YouTube called Soak Strong, and they show a simplified version of the FG knot. I do that, but I add a few more half inches. There is one on my own channel, but I don't know how clear that is filmed. I think it's okay.
I'll chuck a link to that one in the description.
Yeah, you can see it there. So either the Soak Strong one, which is very well filmed, or mine, which I think you can see what's going on, and that will save you a ton of gear. And you can also have the leader in your rod rings. Then it's so neat and small, it doesn't catch when you cast.
Definitely.
You can have a longer leader, so that helps. And when you pull for a break, usually your hook will come off, and then you just get some case of sliding a weight, sliding a bead, sliding your hook on again. If you can't tie the FG knot, whilst you're wanting to, you just want to go and have a go, have a shorter leader that's outside the rod rings and use a uni to uni knot, but put extra turns in your braid.
I personally use,
yeah, put extra turns in your braid, and your braid won't slip then. It's nowhere, once you've learned to tie that FG knot, you'll think, why did I ever use a uni knot? You'll lose more gear with a uni knot. You're going to lose gear anyway. You just got to kind of accept that. So the rig we use is a Texas rig, which is basically a cone or an egg sinker sliding on your fluorocarbon with a bead before a weedless hook. So an EWG hook, which is extra wide gape.
And what size?
Well, I would go, depending on the fish that are around you. If they're fairly small, you go down to a size 2. But I wouldn't go any smaller than that with ballan wrasse anyway, because wherever you are, the biggest fish will turn up in the strangest of places sometimes, you know. And I go up to sort of a 2.0 because I can't. You could go up to a 3.0 if you really want, but I don't believe wrasse have the biggest of mouths, and you've got to
It's
get
like
that.
this, it's almost like a weird kind of beaky
Yeah,
shape.
it is. Yeah, it's a small mouth compared to, say, a perch is just a huge mouth. Same with a bass; they just engulf baits, don't they?
It's almost like a Xander in a way. It's kind of like
Mhm,
it kind of comes away from, you know, where I can't explain it, but I don't
mhm.
know, it kind of comes away and narrows down,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
got to be mindful of that. That's why
Yeah,
personally I try and go as small as I can with the hooks and everything, and
yeah,
I kind of scale it down but make it stronger. It sounds a bit
yeah.
crazy, but like that.
Talking of hooks, exactly what you said. If you're using your EWG, your weedless hooks, or your offset weedless hooks, there's two different sorts. You want one that's extra strong if you can. If you use your bog standard perch hooks, you'll probably get away with it most of the time. But when you said how hard wrasse fight, I have had it myself when I've had nothing else but a finer wire weedless hook. I've had it bend out on me.
Mm.
Um, so we do, if we're like, I am targeting them all the time, I'll buy the time stew strength or freeze strength or forged, whatever they say, or, you know, salt water or something like that. And I'm generally using a size 1 to a size 1.0 hook. That fits perfectly the sort of lures that I use. They're sort of generally 3-inch to 5-inch size. So a 1.0 to a 2.0 max will fit these baits lovely. Um, Sometimes you see lures sort of 6-inch long and the hook's tiny and it's up at the head end.
And you're just
And
using the tail after tail day.
what they do is they'll nip the tails off. That's
Mm.
what they do. There's ways of getting around that. You can sort of what I call hotspot your lures. So where the hook point is, you can put some fluorescent dye on. You can get these pens that you can do that are flavored as well.
Never heard that one before. That's
Yeah, you can
quite
do that in your perch fishing. I mean, perch love garlic. I don't think wrasse like garlic myself, so get something in shrimp or crab or
yeah.
something like that.
Stick a little bit of rag, just chop a rag into 20 and
Yeah,
stick a bit of rag on
you
the hook.
you can do that. Another thing you can do is you can buy these little tins of Vaseline,
Oh, right.
and you can add some colouring to that, some fluorescent dye of some sort to that. I wouldn't put a lot in, you know.
No.
And you can put some flavour, some scent in there, and make one yourself. And all you do is just heat that, and it will just absorb it all, and then it will reset. And you've got yourself a little dye you've made yourself, so you can put your own flavors in there, kind of thing. I mean, flavors help on days when, you know, you have your standard wrasse size baits on and they'll just nip the blooming tails off. Usually it's smaller fish, but sometimes the bigger fish do that as well. And these little things like putting a bit of scent on or hot spotting where your hook point is can make a difference. They just keep it in the mouth a bit longer, or they strike that point where your hook point is because you've highlighted it. So there's a couple of little
Pointers.
non-basic tips, if you
Yeah,
know what I
definitely.
mean. You know, that can help. So that might help at places like Portland. You know, you
Yeah,
might
just
be getting
changing it up, keeping it different.
just doing something a bit different, something like that. Um,
And I
do you want
think,
me to talk about types of lure? Oh,
yeah,
before
yeah, yeah.
before we move on with the hooks, make sure you debarb them. So crush the barb because you can't buy barbless, weedless hooks. I haven't found any really. Just crush it down with your pliers because when you come to take their mouths, although they're small, they're very tough, and that barbless hook will come out a lot easier. It'll do less damage to the fish.
I always go, I always go
Yeah,
barbless
I
when
do whatever I'm
possible.
doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
Do you know
yeah,
what? I don't feel, you know, I think once you fish with barbless, you almost like put off the thought, oh God, like I'm going to lose more
yeah.
fish. I don't think
You
you are.
don't.
If you're playing it correctly and you keep that pressure there, you're never
That's
going
all
to
you got
lose
to do.
one.
And
So,
with a wrasse, there's always pressure.
yeah,
They don't give up until the end.
you're not going to get a
Um,
slack liner where they bomb it to the surface, are
you'll be very unlucky if you do. I can't remember losing a wrasse because I'm using a barbless hook. You normally lose a wrasse because you haven't been concentrating. It's whacked the hell out your bait,
you? Yeah.
and it's got under the rock before you've had a chance to do anything. Which is why you want your drag set hard. You want your gear on the heavier side. Um, I mean, lure types. I was going to say about that, wasn't I? There's you don't need too many types of lure. You want some Senkos. I don't know whether the viewers know what a Senko is. It's just it looks like a worm. It's about 4 or 5 inches. It's an American
Yeah,
bass fishing
a lot
lure.
of the bass
Yeah,
anglers. I'm a
yeah,
big advocate of kind of looking at what they're using and seeing if we
yeah.
can tie into here, because they're all predators at the end of the day. So.
Definitely. That's exactly how it got here. There were a couple of guys in Jersey, I think the White brothers, Keith and Kevin, off the top of my head. They started looking at Japan and America, how they fish for bass and rockfish, and they thought, let's try it over here for wrasse. And they did, and they were successful. And then people like myself who had been bass fishing, catching the old one on plugs, saw that and jumped on it. This is sort of 10 years or more ago now this all happened. And then all of a sudden, like now, perch fishing is really big, isn't it? And I think wrasse fishing is the next thing, because
Really?
perch fishing being so big, like yourself, you go perch fishing. Oh, I can use this gear I've got to have a go for a wrasse when maybe I'm on holiday or something like that. Or you go and you catch your first fish on a lure and you're thinking, great, I love this. I've got to get back to the coast again. So you start traveling. I think you're up in Bristol, aren't you? Up that sort of way. So you've coloured water in the Bristol Channel, haven't you? But you can drop down to Dorset, you can drop down to Devon.
It's a weird location.
Go up to Wales.
Close to everything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's nothing on my doorstep, but then I'm only a short drive from Wales, Dorset.
Yeah.
Have you, Cornwall and, Exmouth, that's not even too far of a drive away. So
no, there's some good wrasse fishing. Well, definitely in Cornwall and around Exmouth as well. There's some good marks around sort of the mouth of the River Axe and Exmouth itself, the entrance to the river there, around the rocks and the harbours, the foreshore there. Anywhere you got structure, that's what you're looking for with wrasse. Before I digress, it's so easy, isn't it, when you start just talking fishing? You can go on forever, can't you? I better go through the lures. I started.
It's good to keep it natural. You don't want to.
Yeah.
It's not like we want to stick on a script. Let it go.
No.
Yeah, you were mentioning the Senko lures. Is there anything?
Yeah, so the Senkos are great, and then you've got your crawl lures you use for your perch fishing. All of these work. Your paddle tails, your little paddle tails are great. They're more so, I find them in the summer, because wrasse are more mobile in the summer. So they might have a go at a paddle tail more readily. Your curly tail grubs you use, your tubes, any sort of creature bait,
And what sort of size? I know you
mentioned... Well, I would go... Yeah, sort of 3 to 5 inches. What you're using for your perch, other than your very small things you might put on a drop shot, say, your 2-inch lures or so, you can use from wrasse. So you've probably got most of the lures you want already if you're a perch angler.
Yeah, definitely. The good thing about lure fishing, and it was a bit confusing when I started getting into doing freshwater after doing sea fishing originally, is you didn't actually need to go out and buy loads of new stuff. And I think that's one of the best part about it. I'm probably the worst person to speak about it, because got a perfectly functioning spinning rod.
Yeah.
Just went and invested in a really nice bait casting system, casting rod. And you know what? You don't need it all. You can literally, if you buy yourself, let's say a 10 to 20 gram casting, not a bait casting, standard spinning rod, stuck on a nice spinning reel, under £100 combo. You can use that for perch, pike, bass, wrasse. You can go everywhere with it, and you can have one box of lures, and you're completely fine. So don't get crippled by what
I think
people are using. Just stick to what works, and that's it.
That's the joy of it, isn't it? I mean, I myself, I've got setups for this. I'm a bit of a tackle tart, really. You see something, once you get into it, I'm mad fishing. Any sort of fishing, I love it all. And it's, look at that. I'll have that. I find with your gear you use on the rocks, personally, I don't buy really expensive stuff because I'm haphazard and I'm going to snap a tip. So you can use your more budget style gear. One of the best reels I've used over the last few years for wrasse fishing is a Daiwa Ninja, and in a 3000 size. It's a great reel. It's not the smoothest reel. You can go and buy your top end Shimano's. I've got some of them as well. But if you can get into it so cheap, and once you've got a rod and reel that's suitable, and you got some braid on there, you've learnt your knots, you've got your basic gear, you just want to focus on the marks you're fishing then. Go and fish them at different states of the tide with a few different lures.
just get
Yeah.
some hours in.
Get some hours in.
Once you've got the basics
Yeah.
down, it all comes with experience. And
Exactly.
there's, that's why I like, go out my way to try different spots when I get an opportunity. But I just, I love getting to know a water and an area and a spot very well, but don't get caught up in going to the same place, week after week. I think it's nice, and it's nice to know an area, and especially when you're starting out and you just want to get some fish on the bank,
Yeah,
do that.
definitely. I agree with
But
that.
to keep it fresh, I
Keep it
love
simple.
changing it up.
Keep it simple when you start out. Keep everything simple. Have your simple basic lures, your standard setup I've just talked about. It doesn't have to be expensive. And like, just get there and do it. It's learning how to catch the fish. And once you learn how to catch the fish, you start catching bigger fish. You'll learn the limits of your gear. And then you might think, you know what, I'm going to buy that more expensive rod or that more expensive reel. And because I'm investing the time in it now, it's worth doing it, isn't it? But if you go and buy, some people got lots of money, they can, but if you go and buy the best gear and then you're catching nothing, it's that saying, isn't there? All the gear, no idea.
There we go.
Yeah, everyone says it, don't they? Whatever your field of fishing, you see people with that. I don't give them grief because they got the money, they can buy it. If you can do that, go ahead and do it. I mean, we all like nice tarty gear, don't we? But there's no point sitting there and not catching anything, is there? You've got to learn how to catch first. That's the main thing.
Well, I'd even say, the best and most trustworthy reel I have it's pretty much unbranded. I think I bought a combo for like 20-30 pounds when I was really young. I think it actually came with a kayak rod. I got a little kayak when I was younger, and I just bought this kayak rod and reel. And you know what? That one reel is still out in the garage 10 years down the line, functioning completely fine, and I use it everywhere. So it's not even, you really don't have to invest a lot of money into it. And usually, if you look after your gear and you wash it down with, water after every salt, after every session,
that is big issue.
Years and years and years. Just keep, look after it, and don't feel like you have to, go out and just spend money for the sake.
No, I'm not the best at looking after my gear. My mate Mike, who runs lure fishing for Wrasse, UK, he's I'm gonna say he's almost anal with looking after his gear. He'll kill me for saying that, but he does. His gear looks like new all the time because he really looks after it. He takes care of it. So I could learn something from him. And I think that's probably why I look after my gear better now. And you get a little routine. It's salt water. Salt water just corrodes things. So when you get back, I have a little spray bottle. Tighten the drag up on the reel, take it off the rod, and just spray it down with a spray bottle. You don't want to be getting on in all the nooks and crevices if it's a cheaper reel, because it won't have I think they call it the IP rating, how easily water gets into the mechanics of the reel. But you can do that, and then the odd drop of oil on the bail arm ball bearing there, where your line goes through. I can't think of the name of the thing at the minute. The odd drop of oil there in and out, and something like the Daiwa Ninja will last you 4 years so far. It's my backup reel. I give it to somebody if they're coming with me. Tuck that on, same rod as I use. There you go, and they catch fish. So you don't need the most expensive gear. It's better to start off with a cheaper gear and learn how to look after it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's true. It's been quite a diverse podcast in a way. We've touched, how you'd go after spots, how you'd like locate spots and what you would look for when you got there, tackle, lures, what you're using, and a bit of rod maintenance and reel maintenance. I don't know where that.
Yeah, just spray the eyes of your rods down. It just sort of happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, into it, doesn't it? It does. Yeah. It's not as just simple as just go out there and put a lure in the water and it happens. It's a long process, and it's a long campaign to get good at a specific type of fishing.
A very important tip I could give you with your wrasse fishing is couple quick ones. Depending what type of lure you're using. If you're a perch fisherman, you'll probably naturally do this anyway. But if you're using something with some sort of tail, so whether it's a paddle or a curly tail or a beaver tail, maybe you need to animate that tail. So your retrieve would be a bit different. You want to sort of short, sharp lifts with those to get that tail working, and then with the weight that you've got on, when it sinks, it will be enough weight to make that tail move again. So it's going up and down. You want to keep within a foot or so of the bottom if you can. If you're using your Senkos, your sort of sticky baits, your crawls, you're more shaking them in place or dragging them along the bottom, or maybe hopping them a little bit. But whatever you do, the main thing you must do, which I guess a lot of people don't realize, is you must pause. So lift, pause, or rattle, pause. And depending on the time of year, you need to pause for longer. So in the winter, the fish you can catch wrasse all year round as long as you have clarity and they're there. You can catch them. The warmer months are better; they're more active. Bigger fish in the winter, surprisingly. But the length of the pause has to change depending on the season. Normally, I'll be pausing for 2 to 5 seconds, something like that. So it'll be a rattle, pause, rattle, and the fish will hit on that pause. And what a lot of people would do is they'll instantly strike, and that's not that's the worst thing you can do. Unless your rod tip's gone round, you don't want to strike. In the winter, they're less mobile. They'll sit there and stare at a lure I've seen them do it for up to 60 seconds and then decide to have a go at it. It's not normally like that. It might be 10 seconds in the winter you need to pause to catch a fish. But that initial bam you get is usually the wrasse stunning the bait, and then they'll back off and have a look at it, and then they'll think, I'm going to have that. Then you may well get another hit and your rod tip pulls round, or it might be on the third hit that the rod tip pulls round. Don't strike initially. You'll be very lucky to catch a wrasse. Your reflexes will have to be that quick. By the time you've felt it, it's left it. Sometimes they'll chase paddle tails, shads as we call them, and they'll take them out of mid-water as they're flying past their heads, but that is very rare, and that's when the bass anglers catch them. They're chucking their lures over them, and it's gone past several times, and I'll have that now. They're ready for it almost. So remember those pauses and fish slow. If you're not catching, just slow everything up, rattle for a bit longer, wait a bit longer, move the lure less, try and keep it more in place. That can work for you. So yeah, there are a couple of little things off the top of my head. If I was going wrasse fishing for the first time, I'd really need to know that.